Lesson 50 Use Transition. 1. Introduction. Good morning, afternoon everyone. Today I would like to walk you through an advanced API in React called useTransition. It may not be something you use in every component, but when you face situations where updates can be heavy or where you want the user interface to stay responsive even while something else happens in the background, it becomes a very useful tool. 2. What is useTransition? At a high level, useTransition is a hook provided by React that lets you mark certain state updates as transitions, that is, non-urgent updates that React can defer or prioritize behind more urgent updates. In other words, if you have a user interaction such as typing, clicking, or navigating, and an update that may involve heavier work, such as rendering a big list or changing a significant portion of UI, you can mark that heavier work as a transition so that the UI remains responsive for more urgent tasks. 3. How useTransition works. When you call useTransition in your component, you get back two things. One is a Boolean flag that tells you whether a transition is pending, and the other is a function you can use to mark one or more state updates as part of the transition. When you call that function and pass in your update logic, React marks those updates as lower priority. Any urgent updates, for example inputs or clicks, can interrupt or preempt them. While the transition is in progress, the pending flag is true, and you can use that to show loading, state or visual feedback. Once the transition completes, the flag goes back to false. 4. Rules and conventions. There are a few important rules and conventions. 1. You must call useTransition at the top level of your component, just like other hooks, not inside loops, conditions, or nested functions, so React can track the hook order properly. 2. The function you pass to mark the transition must wrap the state updates you want to postpone. If you update state outside of that wrapping, those updates are treated as urgent. 3. Because transitions are non-blocking by design, they are not suited for updates that must be synchronous, such as controlled input fields. 5. When to use it, and when not to. useTransition is appropriate when you have updates that are less urgent and could afford to wait a little, for example rendering a large list, performing data fetching with UI updates, replacing a heavy UI, or routing changes, and you want to keep the UI responsive to other interactions. On the other hand, if your update is immediately visible, small, and requires immediate response, such as typing into a text box, toggling visibility of a lightweight component, or responding to a click, then regular state updates, via useState or useReducer, are better. Overusing transitions can degrade clarity and even performance. 6. Complexities, heavy work, browser behavior, and concurrent rendering. Because you are dealing with deferred work, several extra factors come into play. For example, you must ensure that your heavy work is truly something you can defer. If you still block the main thread, the UI remains unresponsive. Also, you need to be aware of how React's concurrent rendering mode works. Transitions let React yield to other updates, but you still must avoid executing absolutely synchronous blocking operations in the transition. There's also the matter of using the pending flag correctly and providing proper visual feedback, else the user may feel lost. Some large operations may still end up blocking if not broken down or scheduled appropriately. 7. Resetting state or interruption of transitions. One of the benefits of marking work as a transition is that it can be interrupted by more urgent updates. For example, if the user clicks something else while the transition is still running, React may abandon or restart that transition in favor of the new urgent update. This means you should design your transitions with the possibility of interruption or cancellation in mind. Your UI should not rely on the transition finishing before the user can interact again. Additionally, you should handle the pending state, the Boolean flag, correctly. If a transition is aborted or replaced, your UI must reflect that accordingly. 8. Troubleshooting common pitfalls. there are several pitfalls. For instance, if you wrap every state update in a transition, you might delay even urgent updates, degrading user experience. Or if you use transition for controlled input updates, text fields, you will notice lag or misbehavior because input updates must remain synchronous. Another pitfall: when you start a transition but then update state outside of the transition wrapper, those updates will be treated as urgent, so mixing urgent and deferred updates incorrectly may cause inconsistent behavior. Also, if you expect the transition to delay work, but you still have heavy synchronous operations inside the wrapper, you'll still block the UI despite the transition marking. Finally, showing the pending flag to the user without giving them meaningful feedback or without considering cancellation, restart can create confusing UX. 9. Summary and key takeaways. useTransition is the React hook designed for marking state updates as transitions, updates that are non-urgent and can be deferred so that the UI stays responsive. You call it at the top of your component, get back a pending flag and a start transition function, then wrap your heavier updates in the transition function. Use it when you have heavy work that can wait. Avoid it for updates that must feel immediate. Keep user feedback in mind via the pending flag. Be aware of interruptions and concurrent rendering, and don't overuse it. Only defer things that truly benefit from being non-blocking. 10. Closing. I hope this gives you a clear conceptual understanding of how useTransition works in React, when and why you should use it, and the key patterns and caveats to keep in mind. In our next session, we can dive into actual examples, walk through a case of heavy rendering with and without transitions, and check how it integrates with other React features like suspense and deferred values.